I know he's fooling with the getting that screen back there. And so just give us some minutes. We kind of wait and rest. My brother gets so mad, he'll try to watch this, and it comes in the middle of my story. He gives me this whole long grief about it and everything. Because it takes a while for our live stream to catch up and everything. And so, it's kind of funny because I hear about it every week. God love him. I'm gonna spend a week with the guy here next week. So,
But John, your brother listens to your sermon.
He does. It's more to criticize because we're the two hardest people on me about speaking. To be honest, yeah, we're the two probably hardest people on me on my sermons. So, yeah, I don't think he's ever called me just like straight out. But anyways, let's talk about the cost. We're going to get off that. So last week we talked about getting paid. We talked about being workers in the vineyard, and at the end, everybody got the same. And some found that offensive. And what did the master say? He said, I pay what I pay. It's a fair wage, is it not? And I pay what I pay. And if you're thinking in a carnal mind, that doesn't sound so great. But if you understand in the spirit what he's paying is eternal life, when if you didn't do anything at all, you'd lead to spiritual death. It's a pretty big thing. So we're going to talk today, though, about the cost to follow. It's free to join, but there's a cost to follow. So I may have told you about this, but there's this exercise place in Mount Vernon called Planet Fitness. And I may or may not have signed up, and I may or may not have canceled my membership, and it's still going on for a year and a half, and I've not been in there. But what you find out about exercise, we're not going to talk about that part, but what you find out about exercise is the thing about Planet Fitness is very cheap. It's $25 if you want to do their black package. And in the black package, you can go get massages, you can get the whole thing. I mean, it's well worth the money. I'm not arguing that. All the fun you can have in the world for $25 a month. But there's a cost. You go to the gym and you're free to use anything there for $25. But let's say you get thirsty. Well, there's drinks. And you can always get water, but there's also protein shakes. And there's all these other things up there. And then you get to looking around and you start looking around and some of these guys don't look like me. They got these big bulges and everything. And they've worked hard. And you get to talking to them, and they start listing off all these supplements they take. And let me tell you, that's a bottomless pit. $150 most of these guys spend on supplements a month. And so, there's a cost. That if you want the true thing, if you want to get where you think you should be, there is a cost. Because everybody thinks, I just like to feel better about life and everything. But then you get there and you get to looking at everybody. You think, man, I'd like to look like that guy. And you go to talking to him, and he's like, and you're like, holy cow, dude, $150 a month you're spending to keep this just for supplements, not even including anything else you might take. Yeah. But I feel like it's worth it. And I said, well, but it's a lot of money. It's the same way with Christ. It is free to join. But there is a cost. And that cost is the cost of discipleship. So if you notice, I've got a weird picture back here. Does anybody know what this is?
I'm trying to figure it out.
Does anybody know? It's actually closer than you think. No, this is in Chicago. This was the Chicago Spire. It was a big plan in 2006. They had planned to build this huge building. The biggest in the Western Hemisphere, second tallest building in the entire world. It was the only thing was going to beat it was the Burj Khalifa. And this was going to be the biggest building in the Western Hemisphere. And so 2006 happened, and they did some redesigns. It was going to be 2,000 feet straight up, almost a half a mile up. Think about that. And so 2006 came, and they were going, and they had to do some redesigns, and they had it all planned out. And then what happened? Do you know where I'm going with this? What happened around that time? Does anybody remember? We had the market crash. The housing market crashed. Money ran out. And this is as far as they got. This big pit that's still there, although they're building a couple new buildings by different people. It's going to look like the World Trade Centers, oddly enough. But anyway, so we went from the tallest building in the world to the World Trade Center buildings. But anyway, but yeah, but it's just sat there. From 2008, it sat there looking like this until just recently, like really recently, just after COVID, they have started building new things there. A cost. Strangely enough, there is a Bible verse about this exact thing. Did you know this? I mean, it's almost verbatim. We're going to go to Luke 14. Luke 14, verse 28. But don't begin until you count the cost. Talking about discipleship. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would build a construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is more money to finish it? There's enough money to finish it. Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it. Oh my goodness. Almost verbatim what you're seeing here. This isn't in some hidden corner of Chicago. This is on 400 Lakeshore Drive. Right in the middle of the Magnificent Mile, there's this huge pit. And don't you know that everybody that's went by there has to tell the story about they couldn't secure enough funding to finish this building. Fortunately, though, it's in Illinois, and we're disappointed with our state most of the time anyways. Sorry if you love it. I like the state people. I don't like the state over people. So nothing wrong with people of the state of Illinois. It's the overall that I have problems with. But anyways, yes, right there in the middle of Lakeshore Drive is this gigantic pit that was going to be the biggest building in the world. And it was talked about in the Bible all these years ago. 2,000 years before this was ever put down, it talked about that. But it's comparing it. The more important part of this is not this folly of a building. The more important part is Jesus is saying your discipleship can be like that. You can start out good. You can start out good. And then, well, now I'm not allowed to go some of those places with my friends because, I don't like myself when I get done with it. Or now my friends kind of get offended when I talk because I've found this new life, like Claire was talking about, that love for something, and they don't want to talk about that because they feel bad about themselves when we talk about things like that. And maybe I'm just being a little too over into it, and maybe I need to cool down. And you see them drift away, and then it's the same thing that we see. People start talking about, hey, you remember when that guy got saved? Where's he now? He's just kind of away from God. It's like he just did a 180 back to what he was. And the word here is to be mocked. It said, then everyone would laugh at you. It's mock you. You started something and you didn't finish it. So the very first thing this could cost is your respect. You're a person who starts something and doesn't finish it. Fortunately, we live in a society where that's more commonplace now. We were talking about an individual one time, my brother and I, and he's told me about his garage and how his garage is a testament to all these things he started and then never finished. He started rock climbing. The rock climbing stuff's still hanging on the wall. He hasn't been in 15 years. He started trying to do parachuting. His windsuit's on the wall, hasn't gone in 10 years. All these things like that. And it can be a testament to we started something and then we failed. But it says in this that we have to count up the cost. We have to consider it. It says sit down and consider it. Because why? We have to be dedicated to it. It doesn't come easy. Like all good things, it doesn't come easy. I had a good friend that was a basketball prodigy. And you know what he did? Every day he went out and he shot 100 free throws. And then he charted his progress on a wall. Every day, beyond all the other things that he did to practice basketball, every day he went and he shot 100 free throws and charted his progress on his bedroom wall to let him know where he was. And he was good at basketball. It takes dedication. It takes that. Moves us into our next verse. Anyone who, this comes from Matthew 7:24-27, says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. He's like a person who builds a house on solid rock. And though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it won't be collapsed because it's built on bedrock. Think about that. You don't build on bedrock by accident. It takes stuff. It takes getting anchors long enough to get down into the bedrock to anchor the house down. It's a very intentional process. It takes a while. Because the foundation has to be laid perfectly in there. It has to be gotten perfectly flat so the house doesn't move when it's on these things anchored. It takes a lot. And he's comparing that to his own teaching. You're just thinking the teaching is wise and I should do it. But it takes a lot. If you notice, Jesus spoke most of his truths in parables because it had to be mined. Once again, another thing that takes dedication. It has to be mined. It has to be thought out exactly what's going on. He compares that, next verse, but anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish. Like a person who builds a house on sand or builds a life on the sand. And when the rains and the floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. Were they in the same place as the first group? Absolutely. They both heard the teaching. Did you see that? They both heard the teaching. It wasn't one group heard it and another didn't and didn't know what to do. One heard it and chose to do it, and the other heard it and went about their way. They built it like one of these little beach shanties that used to be bigger back 40s and 60s, where they just build a house out there exactly like this, out on the sand, and then they'd be fine until a hurricane comes up, and suddenly it's down the beach. It's interesting that they talk about this 2,000 years ago, and people still continue to do it. Even though it said 2,000 years ago it was foolish, and yet there's people that still want to, because they said, oh, it'll never come a hurricane. That's part of being on the beach. It happens. That's why I asked a friend of mine back before my brother moved down there. I said, aren't you worried about hurricanes? Well, the nice weather all the other times is worth a little bit of worry about storm. But, yeah. They built a house on the sand, not anchored to anything. And the rains and the floods came, the wind beat against the house, and it collapsed with a mighty crash. Because you know what? If you're not going to anchor a house, you're also not going to secure it correctly. You'll cut corners other places. I heard from a house builder, they said you should spend just as much on the foundation as you should building the entire house, because that foundation is what will last. It has to last, or the rest of it isn't going to work. And Jesus is talking about that. So that's my second point. It's going to take your dedication. Like all good things, it's going to take your dedication. And dedication costs. Like my friend that shot the 100 free throws. Like when I practiced my piano back when I was growing up, and I spent that hour after school practicing instead of playing with my friends. It costs something. But at the conclusion, hopefully, you've got something worth having. If it's worth having, it will cost. And it usually costs your dedication. keep going forward. Ephesians 2, verse 19 through 22 says, "So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. And together we are his house, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets." See, there we're going back to the bedrock. Built on the bedrock. And the cornerstone is Christ Jesus himself, the most important point of the foundation, because it determines how the walls are going to lay. We are carefully joined together in him, becoming a holy temple for the Lord. And through him, you Gentiles are also being made part of this dwelling where God lives by his Spirit. We're not an accident. You're not meant to be cheap material. We're talking about dedication. We're talking about that if you fail, you could be made fun of. But because you're not meant to be cheap material. You're meant to be plugged into God's holy temple itself. And to be plugged into the temple, you're going to have to give up, number 3, your individuality. You're going to sacrifice some things that would bring you fame and give them to God. We look at some great singers. Do you know Justin Timberlake started out in church? Beyonce started out in church. But soon it became, I can make more money in the world. And the world kept taking and taking, and they're nowhere near a church these days. They refuse to sacrifice their individuality for the greatness of God. Think about that. Sometimes we have to sacrifice what would make us look great to make something work better. You know what would happen if in one of our dinners there was someone that always sought to bring, I don't know, like a baked Alaska. And then everybody else feels weird because their dessert's not that up to that level of baked Alaska. We have a baked Alaska, and then we have cookie pie or something. It's not about the big nice dessert. What it's about is us all working together and people feeling at home while they're mourning their loved one. It requires us to sacrifice some of our individuality for the greater whole. That this is a church family that cares for me and thought enough of me to be able to make a dinner for my family while we're grieving. I was talking with a pastor friend, and I heard of a funeral recently, and the family had to cook the dinner at one of these churches. They had to cook the dinner, and so they served the people that had come to this funeral dinner, and they cooked all the food for it. And we were just both talking how that just doesn't sound right, and I don't know, maybe that works with some, but I don't know, that feels weird. But we give people the opportunity to grieve in the form of being able to talk with loved ones and remember that person well during the dinner. And I'm proud of us for doing that. I'm proud of us that we spend money to be able to make that happen for people as a ministry. But we do it and eliminate the individuality of the effort. It's a team effort. One person cannot do all that. It takes many hands to be able to help people. We are much greater as a group and a part of the temple that God is building than we are as separate. If there was a beautiful altar out in the middle of nowhere and it just sat out there in a field, most of us would all wonder what it was there. We sure wouldn't want to go to it. But when we put that in a building, and it's surrounded by things that magnify and add to its beauty, it becomes greater than what it is. Think about that. I know these are hard things. We don't think about these, but it says the very first thing we talked about was that we have to count the cost. God knew this was going to be different. That's why he told us, count the cost before you come follow me. Do you remember when he sat with those three individuals that were all about coming after him except? And they had all these reasons why they couldn't come to him. One said, well, I need to bury my father before I'd ever be able to do that. Jesus said, I don't need you. Well, I've got a lot of money, and I don't know that I can do this either. I don't need you. I just want to go say goodbye to my parents. If you look back, I don't need you. I need you to come after this wholeheartedly. Weigh the cost before you come. He was very honest about that. Weigh the cost. You shouldn't come into this lightly. You shouldn't come, and that's where I have a problem with some denominations that use emotionalism to move people to an altar when Jesus clearly says, think about this. Go home, calculate it. Can you do it? If you can, then come at it. I respect the Marines. You know why? Because the Marines make no bone about it that it's going to be tough. And if you have the mental toughness, then you can come be a Marine. They're not like all these others that try to wow you with all these exciting things that you could be doing and everything else. The Marine says, no, we don't want you if you're not tough enough. If you will quit before everyone else, I don't need you. That's what the Marines say. But if you're there long after everybody's gone home, come be a Marine. It's the same thing that Jesus is telling you. You're not going to understand everything all the time. You're going to have to trust. I know there's been some people in here that have built homes, and I've heard from them that there comes a point where you look at it and you just think, is this ever going to be done? I have poured out more money than I ever thought possible. That I may have ever known in the world, and we're nowhere. It doesn't feel like we're getting close. I see bare walls. I see all this. I see holes in the walls where they're going to put electricity and everything else, and they're going to put electric plugs, and I don't feel like it's ever going to get done. I most recently talked to this nurse at our hospital, and she just said, "Oh my gosh." It was just like, I would think we would be getting close, that I'd go there, and she said, there's all these things that I see that are going to have to be done before we could get in. And she said, it just felt like it was never going to end. And he said, and then one day, the contractor comes to, he tells you, come pick up your keys. And he said, and you go in and it's finally done. And she said, but it feels like there's parts that just feel like it's never going to get there. They said you see so much progress right there at the beginning where you see the walls go up. But then you go in and it feels like those times move slow. It's the same way in the faith. There's times that you grow so quickly. And then there's times you feel like you haven't heard anything for months. And everybody else is growing but you. You know what Jesus says? Keep coming. Keep knocking. Keep seeking. Keep asking, and it'll be open to you. Keep after it. Keep going when everybody else quits. Choose to do better than the average people who choose to do a form of worldly living and go to church on Sunday. Keep going after it. Next verse. We continue the initial example, and this time Jesus compares it to something else. And this is more a warning for pastors. He said, or what king will go to war against another king without first sitting down with his counselors to discuss whether his army of 10,000 could defeat the 20,000 soldiers marching against him? And if he can't, he will send a delegation on to discuss terms of peace while the enemy is still far away. You can't become my disciple without giving up everything you own. I'd like to make an addendum to that and say giving up the hold of everything you own. I don't think it's wrong to have stuff. I think it's wrong to let stuff have you. But let's talk about that. If you notice, he compared it to a king with a lesser army versus a king with a greater army. There's more unsaved people than there are saved. Did you know that? There's more unsaved people than there are saved. I see it in the church world. I see what some of these churches are preaching, and I'm like, that should not be coming out of a pulpit, because it directly contradicts what we've been taught. But it sounds good to the world. And you know what the truth of it is? Until you get tired of the world, you'll have no place here. People who love the world, they don't fit in a regular church. Or they shouldn't. That's the thing. They shouldn't. You should be here looking for something different. You should be here because you know the world can't fill you. Did you understand that? There's a hole that knows that you're not enough, that the world isn't enough, and that's why you're here. Or it should be. The king says, I have 10,000 soldiers. Is that enough to beat an army of 20,000? That may sound like a mute point written on this, but we've seen that happen before. Hannibal marched elephants through the Alps just so he could get behind the forces, and he wound up winning a victory. He had a plan to use his smaller army to beat the bigger army. You have a God that goes behind you, that makes the difference in all the soldiers in the world. But I want you to think, because the cost of this one is lives. If you brought people to Jesus and then you suddenly find yourself at a crisis of faith, it's almost guaranteed that those people who believed in you enough to follow Jesus are going to fall away. Did you know that? And so it's saying, don't start unless you plan on winning. Unless you plan on achieving. Because at some point, lives are going to be involved. The longer you go in this thing, the more people will look to you to be their example. And lives become involved. That should scare you. It's meant to. You know what? But just in the same way that you'll trust your 16-year-old to take your 13-year-old to basketball practice, because the 16-year-old has now grown up, that you think you can trust them. In that same way, you've put a decision where now a life is involved. You've put another life involved in the decision that your 16-year-old is mature enough to take them to practice. Had you thought of that? It's in that same way in the faith. As you mature, as you're supposed to be, like Paul told us, that I wish I could teach you more, but you're still wanting to drink milk and not go to meat, which is talking about maturity. In that same way, as you go in this life, lives become involved in your life. You begin to get new friends. And at the very least, if you fall away, it makes them question whether they have it, whether they know it, whether this thing's as true as they once believed it. Do you understand that? That the cost of discipleship can be other people's lives. It goes back and forth. And even not just pastors. I've seen people that were strong in the faith that fell away, and it caused others to fall away too. They had brought others to church, and when the person that first brought them goes away, they decide they're going to go away too. It cost people's lives. This is a serious thing. This is a serious thing. I believe they talk about the Michael Jordan flu game where he played with the flu, and they needed that game because if they lost it, they would now be tied up, and I think that's how it went. But they needed that game, and so they knew Jordan had the flu, and they were worried. And yet Jordan pushed past the flu that he had, the barrier that he had, the thing that should stop him from playing, and he helped the Bulls to win that game, which gave them the ability to win the finals. That's the kind of Christians that God needs. He needs you to push past your uncomfortableness. He needs you to push past your need for attention. He needs you to push past all the things that would hold you back from being a true disciple. That's the cost. That's the cost. Let's continue on. I want to wrap up today with this verse in 2 Peter 20. Actually, I think it's 2. I missed a 2. 2 Peter 2, 20 to 22. It says, and when people escape from the wickedness of this world by knowing our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and then they get tangled up and enslaved by sin again, they are worse off than before. It would be better if they had never known the way to righteousness than to know it and then reject the command that they were given to live a holy life. They prove the truth of the proverb. A dog returns to its own vomit, and another says, a washed pig returns to the mud. We're talking about dogs and pigs. Y'all want to come up? We're talking about dogs and pigs. And you think, you that own animals, like our friend Ben over here, you think, yeah, well, pigs go to the mud. Dogs do what dogs do. What does Romans say? It says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And in other words, transformed. You're no longer a pig or a dog. But when you choose to go back to a lifestyle that Jesus sovereignly carried you out of, it's as if you've returned to the former state of the dog and the pig. Today I want you to think about that as we finish this last song. It's a simple song. We all know it by heart. But it always means something more when you realize what it means. Many years ago I watched a play and they took this song. The whole idea was about this song. And they took this song and they had 3 people sitting in a church service. And the first one over here, they sing through the verse, and then it gets to him, and God tells him to give up his girlfriend, that she's pulling him away from him, and he chooses no. The other one over here, it tells her that she's spending too much time on entertainment. And she said, but that's what I know. That's my thing. And he said, yeah, but I want to spend time with you. And she tells him no. And the third was doing some stuff dealing with pleasure. And at first he starts to turn away too. And then he says, no, you're worth it. You've cleaned me up. You've made me better than I could have ever imagined. And I recognize the value of that. And then they ended by singing the verse over again. Would you sing this?